In this video, we're discussing diversification. So far in this class, we've mostly talked about how firms compete in a single product market, whether that's through a differentiation strategy or cost leadership strategy, how they create that competitive advantage, and how they interact with one another. Now we're turning our attention to how and why firms engage in multiple markets or businesses. This could include spanning multiple stages of the industry value chain, or offering multiple products and services which could be related or completely unrelated, and serving multiple geographic markets. So put yourselves back in the shoes of a manager at Coca-Cola. When Coca-Cola was deciding to purchase its bottlers, that was an example of vertical integration, a backward vertical integration where they were acquiring a supplier. If Coca-Cola were to merge with, say, PepsiCo, unlikely, but that would be an example of horizontal integration when one competitor purchases another. Diversification, although I've used it here in a general sense to incorporate all these phenomena, whether it's vertical integration, horizontal integration, or actual pure diversification, is usually used to describe the purchasing of an unrelated company, whether it serves a different market with the same competency or has a completely different competency and serves a different market, or same market, different competency. So let's talk a little bit about vertical integration. The question when moving forward or backward in your supply chain is simply, what is more beneficial, to make or buy a product? But that kind of begs the question of, how do firms determine what they do and what they don't do? Why did Coca-Cola not both make its soft drink and bottle it? And then why did it later choose to bottle its own soft drinks? Where are the boundaries of the firm? So there's an economic theory called transaction cost theory, which basically states it's more efficient to do some activities as a firm than to transact through the market. You read an article earlier that said that it's most beneficial to integrate, vertically integrate, when there's a market failure that you can address. In the Coca-Cola case, we saw this in terms of integration giving a competitive advantage or staving off a competitive disadvantage. But you could apply a more detailed analysis to why you would integrate vertically or not. Using transaction theory, you can see that there's some benefits to performing activities in-house at the firm versus performing them through market transactions. If you're to buy a product or service on the market, so if Coca-Cola has to actually go contract out and get someone to bottle their drinks, there are higher powered incentives. This means that company has more at stake. They could lose that contract, so they're more likely to perform. Whereas if those bottlers are Coca-Cola employees, they probably have a year-long contract or feel a bit more steady given employment law, that they might be able to slack a little bit. Markets are more flexible. Coca-Cola could bottle more when they're producing more and bottle less when they're producing less, whereas if they own the assets in-house, they lose a lot of that flexibility. If you're transacting in the market, you face search costs. You have to go find a vendor. Where transacting in-house, you have administrative costs. So essentially you're paying these people whether they're working or not. You have to deal with managing them. So there is some cost there. In market transactions, you also have to worry about the enforcement of contracts and information asymmetries. That bottler might know more about their own capabilities than Coca-Cola knows. If they were taken in-house, Coca-Cola would be able to open up their books and learn all about the bottling process, And so there would be less information asymmetry inherent in the process. However, there is a principal agent problem when you transact in a firm. That means simply that the folks actually managing the bottling, if they're salaried employees, might have their own set of priorities, where the owners or managers of the company might have a different set of priorities. That being said, there are more ways to integrate than simply transacting on the market or taking a business completely in-house. There's an entire spectrum along which organizations might structure themselves. This might include short-term contracts, licensing or franchising arrangements, JVs, strategic alliances, or actually purchasing a company, taking it in-house. So each of these various manifestations along that spectrum kind of has a different level of trade-off between the benefits of firm and market transactions. And then there's the idea of taper integration, where some firms choose to combine some of the elements of integration with market-based solutions. So for example, Apple retails its products through both its own stores, so it is vertically integrated with its retail channel and its manufacturing, as well as other channels. You can purchase Apple products at Target, at electronic stores, virtually anywhere under the sun. This does seem a bit redundant, but it could also be beneficial. While you might be cannibalizing some sales from the Apple stores, you might actually be able to address a bigger market, and you might have increased flexibility and competition. You might keep those Apple stores more efficient because they know if they're not doing a good job serving customers' needs, those customers will go get those same products at a different store. Now let's turn our attention briefly to horizontal integration. So once again, this is when a company purchases a competitor or combines with a competitor. There are a few reasons why companies do this, and we'll talk a little bit more about M&A, the process by which they tend to do it, in the next video. But companies combine horizontally to reduce competitive activity. To lower their costs, you probably heard the term synergies. To increase differentiation, perhaps they're buying a direct competitor, but that competitor also offers a suite of products and services that are complementary to the ones you offer at the moment. Then there's diversification. Companies typically diversify when they want to gain access to new markets or distribution channels, such as when Walmart bought Asda, a German retailer. They wanted a presence in the German market and didn't want to wait to build it organically, so they purchased Asda, which served a market that they had previously not served. Access to new capabilities or competencies, like when Facebook bought Oculus Prime and entered the virtual reality space. Some argue that diversification might reduce risk if a business moves into unrelated markets or products. For example, a business that is very cyclical might choose to purchase a fairly counter-cyclical business. So a high-end luxury retailer that's somewhat cyclical might purchase a discount retailer. But modern management theory kind of calls that into question, and you can read a little bit about that in some of the assigned readings. Game theorists might say you diversify in order to change the game. If you're entering a market that is served by one of your competitors in your current market, you're essentially broadening the game, and now by competing in multiple markets, you might be able to reach a détente in the US market, but compete very fiercely in Mexico, and it essentially adds just a much richer dimension to the game. Not all diversification is created equal. We talk about diversification along two main axes. That's of core competences of a business and of markets, whether that's a product market or a geographic market. So, of course, it's not truly diversification if a business is relying on the same core competence in the same market. But there's various level of risks depending on how far from that comfort zone a business goes. In the past, there was this idea of portfolio theory, not just in the financial sense, but in the corporate sense, that a business should have a healthy mix of businesses at various stages in the industry life cycle. They should have some high growth rate performers and some cash cows, which were mature companies. But this idea has largely fallen out of favor in modern management theory. You might see this matrix come up in business literature, but it's not typically applied. Which begs the question, is the conglomerate dead? Is this portfolio of managed businesses dead? You had a reading by Montgomery about the kind of capabilities and resources you need in order to create an effective corporate strategy and manage a diversified business. I leave it up to you to form an opinion on that.